Hello everybody, it is September 13th, 2020, and I've got my Aerocraft P-12 here on the trailer. I've had quite a few requests to do a video on the remote controls that I put in this boat, so I thought I'd give it a try here. Little background on the boat. I bought the boat to be able to travel with this boat inside of my 12-foot enclosed trailer. When I use the 12-foot enclosed trailer for camping, I bought the boat to be able to store or to haul it upside down inside the trailer, and then when I get where I'm going, I just pull it out and leave it on the bank of the river or wherever. But anyway, at the time I didn't have a 12-foot boat. I had sold the one that I had, and I wanted a deep and wide one anyway. This one is 21 inches deep, I believe, and 11 feet 10 inches long from tip to tail, and the beam is about 56 inches at the widest point. Got a 710 pound capacity and a 20 horse rating. When I bought this boat, it was in rough condition, a ton of leaks. I bought it with no background on it. The guy I bought it from had never had it in the water, and he bought it from a neighbor, and it had been stored in his barn for about a decade, and he drug it out, decided to sell it, and I went looking for it, and I was looking for a 12-footer, so I thought, well, I'd take a chance on it, and I brought it home. I brought it home and filled it up full of water to check for leaks, and water was just pouring out of it. So I ended up replacing quite a few rivets in it, and I used Glove-It epoxy sealer to seal up the seams. All the original sealer material, the like rubber gasket that was between the seams when it was built, was falling out of the center, and quite a bit was falling out of the seams along the chines too. So it was leaking really bad. Once it was covered with the Glove-It, I had to paint the bottom to protect it from UV. Otherwise, that stuff doesn't last very long. It does a good job of sealing, but it is very sensitive to UV. So decided to paint this one. I don't paint too many of my in fact, this is the only unpainted aluminum boat that I've ever had that I've actually put a coat of paint on. But I had to do it to protect it, and I think it turned out nice. The polished portion it looks pretty dull right now because it's got a lot of water spots on it. I've been running this boat quite a bit, and the last time I polished it was back in early July, so it's got a lot of spots. But anyway, this boat was just an open rowboat when I bought it. This transom was gone. Essentially, the wood that was left in it was just barely hanging on. So I replaced the transom boards inside with 5/4 red oak. I wanted white oak, but I couldn't get it at the time, so I replaced that with red oak. I've got 3/8 marine grade plywood on the back with several coats of marine varnish on it. I've added this 7/8 inch spacer along the way. I did a video on that a while back. And so anyway, on the controls, after I got everything sealed up and had it seaworthy again, I was running this boat as a tiller boat, which is what I intended when I bought it. It turned out to be a pretty poor handling boat from the back. With another adult passenger in the front, it wasn't bad, but it's still, there's not a lot of room between the back two benches either, and my legs were sort of cramped. So after my first outing with it, I decided that I would be better off if I could put controls in it and sit in the middle. So I believe someone else had that idea along the way too, because there were holes for my rivets in a lot of the places. I didn't have to add too many holes to this boat to put in the controls. The cable guides had holes in them, and there were these 3 rivets were here for the deck. I totally lucked out on the deck because my idea with the deck was to mount everything low enough to still be able to turn this boat over and haul it upside down in my trailer when I was going to haul it somewhere to camp. And I achieved that goal. If I take the center cap off the steering wheel and take the bolt out, the steering wheel comes off and the end of the shaft is below the tops of the gunnels. And if the motor's off the back, the control levers go all the way back and they sit below the gunnels. So I can still haul this boat upside down, which is what my goal was when I started out. I had to fabricate pretty much everything in here to make this work the way I wanted it to work. I made the brackets underneath to hold the deck. This deck is a piece of 1-inch white oak. This is also varnished. Screws hold this on each side. Of course, the brackets are riveted to the hull. The steering wheel, this steering wheel is just a generic aftermarket steering wheel, but the rest of the steering, aside from the drum, I made everything else to fit, just to get it to do what I wanted to do with everything being below the gunnels. I made the bracket, I made the guide bushings, I made the shaft, and then of course from there the cable's wrapped around the drum as you would any cable pulley steering system. It goes to that pulley, and there's one on the other side. When you wrap these cables, you go around the drum, the cables have to come off the top of the drum. If they come off the bottom, it'll reverse your steering. So cables come off the top, run along the sides, through the guides, to pulleys in the back, up to the pulleys on the bracket that connects to the motor. And I have a spring-loaded anchor on this side and a solid anchor on that side. The other boats that I have with steering all have springs on both sides. This one I only put a spring on one side, and I find the steering to be a bit more precise that way. I'm not sure why, but I don't get as much like dead feel in the wheel that way. So I think if I do another one, I would do it with a single spring again. One thing I will mention, these holes for these rivets and anchors and stuff were already back here too. These pulleys are too far forward. I would have never put them there, but I didn't want to put more holes in the boat, so I thought I'd give it a try. I may move it back over the winter and put the pulleys more or less in line with the motor like they should be. The geometry is all wrong with this. It gets, as you get away from center, it gets harder to turn, and it pulls on the side of the hull quite a bit. You don't get full turn out of the motor like you should. I wouldn't have done it that way. It looks like someone else did at some point in this boat's life, but I think I'm going to go through and fix that over the winter and correct the geometry on the back of the cables. On this, it's all set up for OMC quick disconnect. This is a 1/4 turn connector here for the steering bracket. This all comes off with that. The cables on these older motors, they go on the outside. The newer ones use a similar setup, but they're all enclosed underneath the cowl, which is good because it keeps these out of the sun. Those things get brittle in the sun after a while, and then you got to change them out. And these are not replaceable ends on these cables. The older ones were. This is a newer style cable. But anyway, these come off easy. You just take that off, roll that out of there, and Take that off there. The other side comes off the same way, basically. For the shift, has a slightly different connector. You pop that latch off of there, and then that comes up and off just like the other cable does. So this connector, that connector, the steering, and I have wires here for my kill switch, which I don't have hooked up to this particular motor yet. Just got this motor. I'll do a video on the motor later. But anyway, I will have this kill switch hooked up since I've got the capability on this motor that has the circuit for it. So that's it on the cables. Then you disconnect those and they come, the motor comes right off. You can put another one on and switch them out in a couple minutes. It's pretty easy. Most of my collection is OMC, so it makes swapping motors out pretty simple thing to do. I did add these braces to the boat. It didn't have any in it when I bought it, and with the sides as high as they are, if you were trying to row it, it was impossible. The sides would flex so bad you couldn't go anywhere. The cable, or the control box, is just a stock standard Evinrude Simplex 2-lever control box. That one's got to be early 70s vintage, I would say. It has the later style cables in it. It's not the 400 series, it's the later ones, without the replaceable ends. But anyway, they're commercially available still. You can find them used. Still some new old stock ones even around if you look around on eBay or whatever. The bracket that is mounted to, that aluminum control box bracket, I made that myself. You can buy those too, but I have a sheet metal brake, so I just bent that up and riveted that to the side. And I put my kill switch in the top of it, lanyard kill switch, so I can put the lanyard around my wrist, and in case I get thrown out of the boat, it won't come back after me. I don't worry about it on smaller motors, but when this boat gets a little crazy with the bigger ones, if the conditions are rough, it could get tossed out. So it's a good idea to have that on there. I got a little GPS speedometer up here. Eventually I want to make a different bracket for that, but at any rate, that's what I got there. This bow cap was his original equipment in this boat. So that pretty much covers everything I did here for the controls. Nothing unusual about the shift and the throttle. That's all off-the-shelf stuff. The biggest thing was getting everything to fit below the gunnels, and that required me to make a bunch of stuff. If it weren't for that, then I could have done something simpler. There are steering assemblies available that have all of this stuff and a thing to mount to a dash, all assembled, and it could have just bolted it to some type of a dash on the deck and been done with it. But that would not have accomplished what I wanted to accomplish with this boat, and so I was required to make some things. Worked out great though. I really like this. It's a lot of fun. It's comfortable to drive, and it's pretty quick with a smallish motor. I mean, I get 26 miles an hour out of it with an 18, which is what I normally run on it. I've got this Evinrude Sportster 25 here that I just bought on it now, and I took it for a quick rip in the pond, and it definitely scoots. Should be a lot of fun. I've run this with RD, Johnson RD, big block 25, and it's a hoot with that, but it's a little bit heavy. Gets to porpoising once you get up the top end, and it doesn't go away. It just gets worse the faster you go. So too much weight in the back there, and if I put enough in the front to balance it out, I might as well go back to an 18. So anyway, that pretty much covers it. I hope this helps everyone that's asked about my remote controls and steering and so forth understand what I did. And thanks a lot for watching. Till next time, keep your prop out of the mud.